Hi, I'm Adam Schnacker, and I attended the Congress for Future Medical Leaders in November 2014, and I want to talk to you about concussions today. I have a personal experience with concussions, and one of the things I learned from my favorite speaker at the Congress, which is Bo Eason, is that your personal story has a lot of power. So I'm going to share with you, first of all, my personal story with concussions. You see, back in 8th grade, I was playing for a club soccer team, which I've played soccer for a long time. That's the thing that I really enjoy to do. And I was the goalie, and I'm going out for the ball, and the other players, the attacker's going out for the ball. He slides in, as I'm sliding in, hits me in the face. I got hit pretty hard. My lips were totally torn up. I found out later I had a broken nose and a concussion, but I didn't know at the time. So the competitor in me just got back up, spit the blood out of my mouth, and I continued to play. I finished the game. I played the next game later on. I never had any idea that I had a concussion. And because of that, I continued to play, and I took another impact. Not a serious impact, really, but I took another impact in the second game. And that second impact made a big difference. I went from having a blow to my head that had incapacitated me a little bit, enough to make me want to just kind of sleep, and it affected my play. But then after that second impact, I was forced to go into the doctor, and they said, calm down, you need to stop. So I was taken out of sports. Eventually I was taken back on my school, and I was forced to only go to half days. I was out of activities for 6 months. That's kind of a big deal. And if I had known that I had a concussion in the first place, who knows how it would have been differently. The second impact is a lot more dangerous than the first. The second impact could have been completely avoided, but we didn't have any way to test it, so I didn't know that I had a concussion. Also, I wasn't about to come out of that game. I wasn't about to just go to the sidelines and sit on the bench and give up on the game, give up on my teammates. I wasn't about to go out of that game. And if me, in 8th grade club soccer, is so competitive that I'm unwilling to come out of the game, imagine, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be a player in the Super Bowl or a player in the World Cup, that you're in the scenario and you want to play for your team, you want to play for your teammates, you want to play for your country in the World Cup, and there's all this riding on it. So you don't want to come off the field. You don't want to stop, even if you have a concussion. And so for that reason, sometimes players will lie about their symptoms. They won't be truthful about what's going on. I remember a story that was told about former quarterback in the University of Nebraska, Zach Lee. He took a hit to the head, and he knew that trainers were going to come out since he was laying on the ground, and he took a hit to the head, and he couldn't remember what the last three plays were. He couldn't remember any of that. So he asked his center, hey man, what were the last 3 plays? Because he knew that the trainer was going to ask him that. As soon as he was able to tell the trainer the last 3 plays that they ran, he stayed on the field, he continued to play. He took more hits, he took more trauma to his head that would have been totally avoided, and he didn't have any major long-term effects. As of now, we don't know. But he took unnecessary extra head trauma because he was able to trick the trainers by lying to them. And that's not something that the trainers can do anything about. That's not something that the trainers can really help, because if the patient isn't honest with their symptoms, with the way that current concussion tests are, it's almost impossible to truly diagnose them correctly. And so I've got my story, and I've had this experience with concussions, and I head to the Congress. And honestly, going into the Congress, I really didn't have all that much as far as ambition, especially for right now. I'm just gonna live my life. I'm gonna get good grades in school. I'm gonna have fun with friends. I'm gonna play music, and I'm just gonna enjoy my life as it is right now. Enjoy being a teenager, and then later on, I'll go and work on research projects. In college, I'll go and do that, and later on, I'll try to impact people's lives. But then, right from the beginning in the Congress, when there were people like Jack Andreka and Sheree Bose, and it continued throughout the weekend, all these young people that had gone and done things already. They hadn't waited for their time. They hadn't waited for adulthood or a new opportunity, but they took the opportunity they had. And I realized that there really isn't any difference between them and me besides their courage to go and do something now and not be held back by the limitations of their age. Because in reality, there is no boundary to helping people. We put boundaries on it, but there is no boundary. There's not a boundary that intrinsically blocks people from helping other people. And concussions really are a big deal right now because we're just realizing how big of a deal they really are. There's terrible long-term effects, such as, for one example, depression, which could, in terrible cases, lead to suicide. There's been cases of CTE, and there's been terrible long-term effects that have come from repeated head trauma. And this isn't just athletes, this is military personnel, and this could be people just in everyday lives having problems like this that are not necessary because of repeated head trauma. So I'll go into the Congress, and I've got my story, and I've got this interest in medicine and especially in brain health. But I didn't really have any ambition. I didn't really have any desire to do anything right now. Or more than desire, I didn't really believe that there was anything I could do right now. And then I go, and the very first day, there's people like Jack Andreka and Sheree Bose talking about things that they've done already, things that they didn't wait to do because they knew that they could make an impact on the world right now. So, armed with this newfound inspiration, I went back out into the world. And my proposition is this: instead of diagnosing concussions by symptomatology, by looking at the symptoms and subjectively deciding whether or not the patient indeed has a concussion, I propose using chemical analysis. In chemical analysis, I would like to look at the contents of the blood of patients with concussions and without concussions, searching for abnormalities and patterns in the contents. I would also like to look at the blood contents of patients before a concussion, after diagnosis of a concussion, and after recovery from that concussion, and look for any biomarkers that there might be for that actual concussion. This idea is not completely a new one. Researchers at the universities of Pennsylvania and Baylor may have found a lead as far as a biomarker for concussions. A calpain-derived alpha-spectrin N-terminal fragment SNTF, from now on to be referred to as SNTF, has been shown to be abundantly present in patients with mild traumatic brain injury. According to a study done at the University of Pennsylvania on hockey players, levels of SNTF were found to be greatly elevated in patients that had only 1 hour earlier received an impact that had given them a concussion. And those levels of SNTF remained elevated from 12 hours to 6 days later, correlating with the severity of the concussion that they suffered. So I'm proposing the use of SNTF or other biomarkers in the diagnosis of concussions, to at least aid in the diagnosis of concussions, and also to aid in the decision for clearance of patients to activities after the concussion is. Currently, the detection of SNTF requires lab work. However, my goal is to put this concussion test into the hands of trainers, into the hands of nurses, into the hands of those on the sideline, into the hands of those in the field in real life. I envision a device similar to those used by diabetics currently to test blood glucose level that has a finger prick that can extract a drop of blood, and from that drop of blood the SNTF levels could be detected. This device would be relatively inexpensive, relatively painless, and less time-consuming than a lab draw. And it would be potentially more accurate than current symptomological concussion tests. Even though it can't protect you from the original first impact concussion injury, by increasing the accessibility, the accuracy, and the timeliness of concussion tests, SNFT can greatly reduce the amount of second impact injuries. These dangerous second impact injuries, by preventing them or at least greatly reducing and diminishing their existence, this will save the lives of many and the livelihood of many fold more. I thank you for the opportunity to share my idea, and I'd love to see concussion tests be more accessible.